The purpose of this video is to give you the basic overview you'll need to get started applying EonCoat. We don't need to spend a lot of time discussing the problem with standard coatings and rust, because you know most coatings perform very poorly in preventing rust from forming on steel. Each year, corrosion costs the United States a staggering $276 billion. That's more than 3% of this nation's gross domestic product. And every nation on this planet faces the same problem. How do you stop steel from rusting? In this video, you are going to learn how to stop rust by applying EonCoat. EonCoat is fundamentally different from any coating you have ever applied. The painting you have done in the past involves putting a barrier coating between a metal surface and the elements. But EonCoat is not a barrier coating. EonCoat is a surface treatment that alloys the steel it touches. By alloying the metal surface, EonCoat prevents rust from ever developing. Because all rust begins at the surface, if the surface has been alloyed, then rust can't form. No exposed surface means no corrosion. This distinction between EonCoat and every other coating is so important that the United States government and many overseas governments have issued patents to prevent others from copying the EonCoat formula. Because EonCoat is a corrosion-resistant surface treatment for steel, EonCoat lets the steel protect itself. Once EonCoat is sprayed onto metal, an alloy forms. The acid in EonCoat's formula reacts with the steel to form an iron phosphate layer. This iron phosphate layer is the first line of defense against corrosion. Then the chemically bonded phosphate ceramic functions as a second line of defense, a white ceramic top coat that continually leaches phosphate in order to prevent rust from forming. So the EonCoat you are spraying actually becomes part of the metal. It doesn't cover the metal, it becomes part of it as a true alloy. So that you can see for yourself just how much different and how much more effective EonCoat is, take a look at this electron microscope picture on the screen. You can clearly see that EonCoat has alloyed the metal. Look how the alloy layer has formed. Now keep in mind, the width of this picture is tiny. Peak to peak, the distance is less than 1/1000th of an inch on a typical blast profile of about 2 mils. While you can see how EonCoat forms an alloy layer, remember that polymer coatings do not do this. They rely on much weaker mechanical bonds. Polymer coatings lay over the peaks like a blanket, and as soon as a polymer coating is scratched and moisture gets beneath the coating, watch out, because the problems begin and rust soon arrives. With EonCoat, the coating bonds chemically to the steel, not mechanically, but chemically, so there are no unprotected valleys. Just look at the picture. You've seen it with your own eyes. EonCoat forms an alloy with a layer of magnesium iron phosphate, and that alloy layer becomes part of the metal. There are a few important benefits of EonCoat that you should be aware of. EonCoat is as green and environmentally friendly as a coating gets. EonCoat is inorganic. It contains no carbon molecules, so it contains no volatile organic compounds. That's right, no VOCs. And EonCoat contains no hazardous air pollutants, no HAPs, and EonCoat has no odor. As a person applying the coating, you'll be pleased to learn that unlike most of what you spray, EonCoat contains no toxins. EonCoat isn't hazardous to you or to the environment that you and your family live in. And EonCoat isn't flammable. In fact, it has zero flame spread. All you need to wear to apply EonCoat is a dust mask, safety glasses, and gloves. EonCoat is water-based, so cleanup is easy. You just rinse the equipment with water. And because the material is not hazardous, disposal is simple. The acid and the base in EonCoat's two-part system react rapidly, and the coating is dry to the touch in less than 20 minutes. And as you'll see in this training video, EonCoat is easy to apply, and the coating can be successfully used in a much wider weather window than ordinary coatings. The single most important factor in successfully applying EonCoat is preparing the surface of the carbon steel properly. If you prepare the surface of the steel properly, then EonCoat will lock on and won't let go. If you do not prepare the surface properly, then the EonCoat will fail. So please pay close attention to this section of the training video. As we discuss surface preparation of the steel, keep in mind that EonCoat is not a barrier coating. It does not bond mechanically to the substrate. EonCoat is a surface treatment of the steel. It forms an alloy by chemically bonding to the steel. But in order to form the alloy, in order to chemically bond, the EonCoat must directly touch the steel. Remember that. EonCoat must touch the steel. First, we need clean steel, not white metal blasted, but clean. Specifically, you will need to blast the steel to meet a NACE 3 or SSPC 6 level of preparation. You may also know that the level of preparation as a WJ1. The whole point of blasting the steel is to expose the metal substrate. Specifically, all mill scale must be removed. All old coatings must be removed. All grease and oil, including fingerprints, must be removed. All sand and dust must be removed. All loosely bonded rust must be removed. All chemical residue must be removed. All tape and the adhesive that is left on steel when the tape is pulled off must be removed. And finally, all blast media should be removed by pressure washing the surface to be coated. You should select your blast media wisely. As always, keep in mind health and safety. The proper protective clothing and respiratory equipment should be worn while blasting. But regardless of whether you use aluminum oxide, glass bead, or sand, it is essential that when you are finished blasting, you thoroughly pressure wash the surface you have just blasted. Make certain all dust and residual blast media have been washed away before you apply EonCoat. Why does the steel have to be clean? Because the acid in EonCoat goes into the solution first and dissolves the very top layer of the steel to prepare it to react with the phosphate in the EonCoat. So the acid must touch the steel. Nothing can be between that acid and the steel. And if the EonCoat can't directly touch the steel, then the alloy can't form and the coating won't work. Remember, you are not spraying paint. You are alloying steel. We strongly advise that a NACE or SSPC inspector be present at the job site when you are preparing the steel for EonCoat in order to confirm that the surface preparation has been done properly and according to industry standard specifications. The inspector will examine your work to make sure you are in compliance with the standard. So be particularly careful not to miss blasting the areas around baffles, flanges, and corners. When it comes to surface preparation, you might think flash rust has to be removed in order to apply EonCoat. But flash rust is okay, because when the acid from EonCoat reacts with the iron oxide in flash rust, it forms an alloy layer. But a word of warning, if you can wipe your hand across the rust and the hand comes up orange, then you cannot apply EonCoat. You will need to pressure wash the surface of the steel and remove the loose rust. Only then can you apply EonCoat. Remember, you can use EonCoat on a damp surface. Standing water is not acceptable, but a damp surface will work. There are weather parameters for the use of EonCoat that you should be aware of. First, we'll talk about humidity. High humidity is not an issue. Remember, EonCoat is a water-borne coating, so high humidity is no problem. Very low humidity at the time of application is a potential problem. This is because when humidity is very low at the time of application, the surface can dry out before the acid-base reaction in EonCoat occurs. Very low humidity, relative humidity less than 30%, can lead to the coating cracking after it is applied. There is a simple, effective solution. In a very low humidity environment, simply mist the steel surface with water. That moisture will compensate for the low humidity if you have to spray EonCoat when relative humidity is below 30%. Next, we'll talk about how temperature interacts with EonCoat. Note that when we talk about the temperature, we are not talking about atmospheric temperature, We're talking about the temperature of the steel on which EonCoat is to be applied. The maximum substrate temperature is 115 degrees Fahrenheit. If the surface temperature of the steel is greater than 115 degrees, do not apply EonCoat. Instead, to cool the substrate, you should mist the steel with water from a pressure washer. Use the tool of water as a means of bringing down the surface temperature of the metal. The reason you need to cool the surface temperature of the steel to 115 degrees or lower is that if the metal is too hot, it will speed up the rate of reaction too much, and the bound water that is inside EonCoat will escape. That will lead to mud cracking and will limit EonCoat's ability to function properly. Spraying EonCoat on cold substrate is not an issue. A cold substrate will slow down the rate of reaction, and while EonCoat will take longer to dry, the coating is still dry in less than an hour. But a warning is needed here. Do not spray EonCoat on steel that is in danger of icing. To be safe, do not spray EonCoat if the steel is 40 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. The reason being that ice can begin to form on steel and EonCoat will not bond to ice. So keep in mind that cold steel is good, but freezing temperatures that can lead to ice on steel are not acceptable. EonCoat is a two-part system. There is an A component that is the acid component, and there is a B component that is the base component. The system only works when the A and B components, the acid and the base components, are brought together. In order to bring the two components of the EonCoat system together, you will need to use plural spray equipment. You cannot brush or roll apply EonCoat. You must spray apply it using plural spray equipment. Specifically, plural spray pumps and a plural spray gun are required. A note of caution: if you have not used plural spray equipment before, then you will need to receive separate training on how to operate plural spray equipment. We will not teach you that in this video. This video assumes you already know how to spray plurals and are experienced in doing so. You should not spray EonCoat if you do not have training and experience spraying plural component coating systems such as polyurea. First, we begin with a typical plural spray pump system like this. Notice that no heater hose is required with EonCoat. You can see the A and the B pumps. All A and B equipment is always kept separate so that the acid and the base never touch one another in the spray equipment. With EonCoat, you must use a 1-to-1 ratio pump. Every stroke of the air piston is one stroke of each pump. They will deliver an equal volume of fluid out of each of the paint lines. With the system we use, the liquid is fed into the pump through these two saddlebags, but you can also use direct draw from the buckets themselves. You can see that the hoses from the pump then go directly to the spray gun. As a standard operating procedure, to avoid any risk of cross-contamination between the A and B components, you should use colored tape to mark the hoses. In that way, you will know that you are always using the same hose for the A component and the same hose for the B component. For example, we use black tape to mark the hoses that carry the acid component and green tape to mark the hoses that carry the base component. The two paint lines are hooked up on each side of the pump. Each of the two paint lines then runs from the pump to the spray gun. The spray gun will have two separate paint lines running into it, one for the A component and one for the B component. For the paint lines, we recommend 50 feet of either 1/2 inch line or 3/8 inch line. At the end of each paint hose, we add a 10-foot whip hose. The 1/4 inch whip hose is used so the gun is easier to handle. Now, for those of you not familiar with it, a whip hose is a short length of hose that has a swivel on the end. That allows more rotation movement when you have a tool connection. Each of the two whip hoses is then attached to the plural spray gun. For your safety, all paint hoses need to be 3,000 psi or greater, and high-pressure threaded fittings are required to connect the hoses. This is a plural spray gun. This specific model is what we recommend. It is a Binks 43P, but there are other brands and models you can use. This is the mixed chamber of the gun. You see two valves on the gun. You squeeze the trigger and it opens both valves, the A and the B valve. You also have a third hose. That goes into the plural spray gun. This is the water hose. The water hose is here for flushing out the gun. The water does not enter into the mix chamber with the A and B components. We recommend 50 feet of a 1/4 inch water hose with a PSI rating over 200. So first the pump system is hooked up. Then EonCoat is added to the pump. The EonCoat will then pump out of the plural spray gun. The A and B components will then be in their respective paint lines leading into the gun. When you pull the trigger of the plural spray gun, the A and B components enter the mix chamber and come into contact for the first time. This device, the static mixer, is then used to mix the A and B components in equal parts as the combined liquid is then atomized and sprays out of the gun. This is a typical Graco static mixer. It screws right onto the end of the gun, and it is in the static mixer where the paint gets mixed. Then we put our standard rack tip on the end of the gun like this. You can see that this is a reversible rack tip. When you pull this trigger, the EonCoat is on the substrate within seconds after it has been mixed in the static mixer. Remember, EonCoat is a surface treatment. The acid must react with the metal. A note of caution: you never mix the A component and the B component in a bucket and then try to apply it. It will not work. So to recap for you, as you can see, I have two paint lines and one water line feeding into my plural spray gun. In my plural spray gun, I have a Graco static mixer, and at the business end of the gun, I have a rack tip. For the rack tip, we recommend sizes from 217 to 525, depending upon the application. Smaller for finish work and larger for spraying flat areas on a tank. We recommend starting with a 323. The tips are about $40 each, and we suggest you keep plenty of these on hand. Typically, they last 1 or 2 jobs before needing to be replaced. Now this is important. When you stop spraying, open this valve on the back of the gun. This will open the water valve. The water valve applies high pressure water from the water hose and flushes out the system. So if you are in the middle of the job and you want to take a break, take your finger off the trigger and then open the water valve. Flush the system out with water for a few minutes, then close off the water valve. Now you can set the gun down and take a break. A word of caution: when you open the water valve, do not pull the trigger of the gun. If you pull the trigger of the gun, you will force high pressure water back down your paint lines and you will have a big mess. So when the water valve is open, do not touch the trigger of the spray gun. Now I want to take a few minutes to discuss cleaning the equipment. At the end of the day, when you are done spraying EonCoat, it is crucial that you clean your equipment properly. You need to flush the spray gun, the pumps and hoses with water every day. Failure to do so will ruin your equipment and cause the EonCoat to be applied improperly. The first thing to clean up is your plural spray gun. Take off your mixing chamber like this. On either side of the gun is a little orifice. Take the orifice out. Now hook up the water line to that side of the gun. Pressurize the water line. Now pull the trigger. That will blow water right out of the mix block and clean it out. Now repeat the same process on the other side by taking the other orifice out, connecting the water line to it, pressurizing the line, pulling the trigger and running water through it to clean it out. Now take the static mixer off and dump the element out like this. If you leave this element in and the coating dries around it, you will not get it out again. That is a $300 part, so make sure you take care of it. Take the mixer out, rinse it with water, get it nice and clean, and then dry it off. Then you can put it back in and leave it until you spray again. Now for cleaning the pump. If you still have product left in this pump, what you should do is put the A bucket beneath the A valve and the B bucket beneath the B valve. Now open the valve and let the product drain from the saddlebag back into the appropriate bucket. In this way, you will recover unused product and not waste it. You will still have some product left in your paint lines. The way to get that product out of there and recover it is to fill your A and B saddlebags with water. Turn the pump on. As the pump strokes, the water will push the solids out ahead of it. Pick up your paint hose, pump the product right back into the appropriate bucket. Once water begins to come out, stop spraying into the bucket. Now continue pumping water through the paint hose to clean it. We recommend pumping about 10 gallons through either side to clean them out. Leave your pump full of water so that it stays clean until the next time you use it. You'll find that if you keep your system clean, you will have very few problems spraying EonCoat. As you prepare to apply EonCoat, the first thing you will need to do is open the buckets and mix the coating. Keep in mind that EonCoat is a high solids material suspended in water. So the material is not going to look like the standard coating you are used to seeing when you first open the bucket. Here is what the bucket of Part A looks like. Before you open it, confirm the bucket is a black color and it has a large letter A on the outside label. This is the acid side of the EonCoat system. As you open a bucket of Part A, it should have an off-white color. Notice how the material looks like a gel. It should have the look of a thick gelatin. The material is deliberately made like this so that it has a long shelf life. You will need to use an electric paddle mixer with round edges to properly mix Part A. Take caution when choosing your mixer paddles, as sharp paddles will scrape plastic off from the inside of the bucket and contaminate the coating. Use only mixer paddles that are rounded. Begin by gently placing the paddle mixer into the Part A bucket, like this, to begin the breaking up of the gelatin-like contents. As you add more energy, you will see how rapidly the contents of Part A begin to convert to a liquid. Be sure to gently scrape the material from the bottom of the bucket. Use a clean wooden paint mixing stick to do this. Be sure to get all the material from the bottom rim of the bucket. You will need to mix the material for about 60 seconds until it is smooth and flows like a liquid. When the material is properly prepared, the viscosity will be about 8,000 centipoise, and Part A will flow like molasses. Look how smooth Part A becomes in about a minute, and it is now ready to use. Keep in mind that if you were to reseal the bucket and leave Part A untouched for about 12 hours, it would return to the gel-like state that you first saw when you opened the bucket. Now let's open Part B. Before you remove the lid of the bucket, confirm that the bucket is green and that it is marked with a large B on the outside label. This is the base side of the EonCoat system. As you open the bucket of Part B, it should also have an off-white color, but notice how the material looks different than Part A when you first open that bucket. When you open Part B, it will look more like a liquid, but don't be fooled. It has suspended solids in it just beneath the low viscosity liquid floating on the top of the bucket. You will also need to use an electric paddle mixer with rounded edges to properly mix Part B. As with Part A, take caution when choosing your mixer paddles, as sharp paddles will scrape plastic off from the inside of the bucket and contaminate the coating. Use only mixer paddles that are rounded. Before you touch Part B, take note, do not place the same mixer paddles into Part B that you used for Part A unless you have thoroughly washed the paddles clean with water. It is essential that you not cross-contaminate Part A and Part B. These two parts must never come in contact with one another until that occurs in the spray gun. Begin with gently placing the paddle mixer into the Part B bucket, like this. As you go deeper into the bucket of Part B, you will feel the thick suspended solids come in contact with the paddles. As you add more energy, you will see how rapidly the contents of Part B begin to convert to a liquid. Be careful not to splash Part B out of the bucket. which is easy to do because initially the liquid is at the top and the solids are at the bottom. Just as with part A, be sure to gently scrape the material from the bottom of the bucket. Use a clean wooden paint mixing stick to do this. Be sure to get all the material from the bottom of the rim of the bucket. You will need to mix part B for about 60 seconds until it is smooth and flows like liquid. When the material is prepared properly, the viscosity will be about 8,000 centipoise and part B will flow like molasses, just like part A. Look how smooth part B becomes in about a minute. It is now ready to use. Now that part A and part B are mixed, you need to make sure they are placed in the correct saddlebag of the pump system. Part A goes in the A container on the pump, part B goes into the B container on the pump. Do not mistake the two. Before you begin spraying the substrate, you should spray a section of cardboard to make certain the spray gun is functioning properly and that any water you have used to purge the gun has been sprayed off. Now we're ready to spray EonCoat on the substrate. The EonCoat should spray like a white mist. Orientation of the spray gun to the substrate is very important. Make sure the spray gun is kept at a 90-degree angle to the substrate with no wrist break. You should maintain a consistent 36-inch distance from the gun to the substrate. Always start and stop your spraying pass off the substrate. Do not feather the trigger. Instead, fully pull the trigger to begin spraying. Maintaining a constant trigger pull will result in more even application of the coating and will help prevent packouts. Spray through corners to minimize buildup. Alternate directions of coats between vertical and horizontal for more even coverage. A typical pass of a plural spray gun applies 3 to 6 mils of EonCoat. Wet film thickness is virtually the same as dry film thickness. You must spray 20 mils of coverage on the substrate for EonCoat to work to its optimal performance. Again, 20 mils thickness is what you are to spray. Monitor line pressures on the pump system, and remember, a 1-to-1 ratio of part A to part B is required. Also, monitor the fluid levels in the saddlebags to make sure you do not interrupt your spraying because you run out of material. If you are going to stop spraying for more than 1 minute, you must water purge the spray gun the way I have already shown you in this training video. The EonCoat you have just sprayed will be dry to the touch in minutes and fully cured in less than an hour. In 3 hours, you can apply a sealer or top coat over the EonCoat if you wish to do so. And now, here are some of the more common questions that we get from some of our technicians in the field. We have to apply EonCoat at an oil refinery. The tanks we want to coat have some patches of tightly bonded old paint on them. Can we apply EonCoat over the old paint? No, you cannot apply EonCoat over old paint. If you do, the EonCoat will not be able to touch the steel. And if the EonCoat does not touch the steel, then the alloy layer will not form. You must remove all old coating before you ever apply EonCoat. Or WJ1 level of surface preparation is required before you apply EonCoat. And that means no old coating can be on the substrate before you apply EonCoat. We have I-beams at an industrial site that we want to coat with EonCoat. We would like to apply the material with a roller and a brush. Can we do this? No, you cannot apply EonCoat with a roller and a brush. You must use a plural spray system of the type described in this training video in order to successfully apply EonCoat. Because EonCoat is a two-part system and the acid component and base component must combine properly in order to alloy the steel and form a protective ceramic layer. It must be spray applied. The only exception to this is for doing small areas of touch-up work. In that event, pour a small amount of part A into a hard plastic cup. Then pour an equal amount of part B into the cup. Mix the contents of the cup with a clean wooden stirring stick. Now you can use a small brush to apply the EonCoat to the touch-up area. But you need to do this quickly. The EonCoat will become rock hard in the cup in a matter of minutes. You will know the EonCoat is working because you will feel the outside of the plastic cup getting warm as the A component and B component react together. We are spraying EonCoat in the summer at a power plant in the desert. The surface temperature of the steel is about 135 degrees Fahrenheit. There is also a strong desert wind blowing. Can we apply the EonCoat under these conditions? You cannot apply EonCoat before you cool the steel and add moisture to the substrate. You will need to use a pressure washer to mist the steel with water. Make certain you have lowered the surface temperature of the steel to 115 degrees or lower. And to help compensate for the low humidity of the desert, especially windy, dry conditions, you will need to mist the substrate. Remember, if the relative humidity is lower than 30%, you will need to mist the substrate before you apply EonCoat. Last year, we applied EonCoat to the exterior of a storage tank. Yesterday, a forklift driver scraped up against the tank and damaged it. The tank is still structurally sound, but some of the outer ceramic of the EonCoat was torn off. Can we apply a new layer of EonCoat over the old EonCoat? Yes, you can apply a new layer of EonCoat over an old layer of EonCoat. And here's how. First, if there is any loose coating where the forklift hit the tank, just remove the old coating by hand. Then take a piece of fine grit sandpaper and smooth out the transition between any rough edges and the area where the existing coating is unblemished. Now spray the new EonCoat right over the old EonCoat in the area that was damaged by the forklift. It's that simple. We've seen this happen before. And notably, even if the ceramic top coat is torn off, the alloy layer that has formed beneath it will protect the steel. But to continue to give years of additional protection, just reapply a layer of EonCoat just as I described. What happens when you are flushing your paint lines with water and you get some water back in the bucket where the EonCoat is? The answer is that you don't need to worry about it, because EonCoat is a water-based material. Accidentally splashing some water on it won't harm it. You can still use the material in the bucket. Of course, you would never pour water into it, but splashing some water onto it is not a problem. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this EonCoat training video. Keep in mind, as you are preparing the substrate and applying EonCoat, that you are not spraying paint. You are applying a surface treatment for steel. And that surface treatment will form an alloy layer that will protect the steel for many years to come. The future of that steel is in your hands. Take good care of it. It doesn't deserve to rust. And by choosing to apply EonCoat, you will prevent it from rusting for a long, long time. I hope you found this training video helpful. If you have any questions, just call or email us. We want to make sure you feel comfortable applying the world's most effective anti-corrosive technology. From all of us at EonCoat, thank you and good luck.